Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Now I had wanted to do a live stream, but it wouldn't work for some reason. Anyway, this is about the recent election in the Commonwealth of Australia. So Australia just had a federal election, and the Labour Party won. So Anthony Albanese has been swept to office. Has just been sworn in as Prime Minister. Though the election was a few days ago. So he's leader of the Australian Labour Party, ALP. Notice that they spell Labour there the American style in Australia, even though in Terra Australis Incognita they use American spellings in almost nothing else. So a number of firsts, Penny Wong, I think she's the first Chinese Australian elected to the Australian House of Representatives. So Anthony Albanese, he's known as Albo to many, and he makes much of his humble origins. He's born to a single mother in about 1963, when being born out of wedlock was considered a bit embarrassing, might have been insulted and bullied about that. And his mother was an Irish Australian. She'd been on a ship to Europe where she had a liaison with an Italian sailor, and when she became pregnant, he thought that was the opportune moment to tell her that he was already married with 3 children. Anyway, so the Liberal National Coalition has been sent packing. Scott Morrison obviously had to tender his resignation to the Governor-General of Australia. As everyone knows, the Queen of Australia is Elizabeth II, but she's obviously very indisposed and frail and only used to tour Australia intermittently. They're careful to say not a visit because, she belongs to Australia as much as she does to her other Commonwealth realms. But is the Governor-General represents Her Britannic Majesty there. And you may know in 1999 that was a referendum, should Australia do away with the monarchy and become a republic? Do you or don't you want an Australian head of state? As Paul Keating, the Labour leader, famously asked John Howard. But there's a possibility there'll be another referendum in Australia, and plus a generational moment has passed. It's been 23 years now since the last one, but I think that's a low priority. So this election was not a ringing endorsement for Labour. They actually got fewer votes this time than last time. Partly because the Greens did a bit better than usual, and there are lots of independents. So one of the 4 first orders of business is for Albanese to fly for the Quad meeting India, Japan, and the United States. These powers in the Pacific that would like to contain China. So Penny Wong's as foreign minister, she's going to Nippon with him. Anyway, so this is the first Labour government in several years since Kevin Rudd was booted out. Remember, Australia is the coups capital of the democratic world. Democratic palace coups, parliamentary coups. Rudd was booted out by Julia Gillard, his Labour colleague. He managed to defenestrate her and come back as Prime Minister for about 2 months before an election, but that didn't save Labour's bacon. And Julia Gillard had made a previous attempt to oust him, and he'd made a previous attempt to come back. So wow, there's a lot of plotting, ducking and diving. But anyway, so Labour's got 74 seats, so looks like just shy of a majority in the House of Representatives, 76. The coalition, that's Liberals and Nationals, have got 54. There's this bizarre situation where the Liberals and the National Party have been in coalition for decades, but have never formally amalgamated. The Green Party got 3. There are independents with 12, and there's this Cats Australia, KATT. Some guy from Queensland's got his own party called Cat Australia. That's it. Anyway, it says compulsory voting in Australia, as you might know, and so they get about 95% turnout. There's a fine if you don't vote without good reason, and there's this curious multiple choice system. A single transferable vote, and you must use all your preferences or it's a spoiled paper. So one of the big headaches for Australia is carbon emissions, how they're going to reduce their carbon footprint. The Greens are a significant force. Okay, they don't have that many seats, but they're increasingly strident and they're amplified in the media, and they were edging Labour out. But the Liberals and the Nationals were a bit sceptical about the whole climate change thing. Scott Morrison was openly ridiculing it. And the problem is that Australia makes a lot from selling coal and oil, and they don't want to lose out on that. So a lot of blue-collar towns, which would otherwise be Labour voting, will put off Labour because of Labour's perceived hostility to hydrocarbons and these people making money. So Australia is a very prosperous country, very high in the Human Development Index. So in a sense, they've never had it so good as they have for the last 20 years. Okay, some jitters around 2008. Is one of the reasons why young Australians hardly come to the British Isles anymore to work. As recently as the 90s, it seemed de rigueur for all young Aussies between the age of say 18 and 23 to spend at least 1 year in the British Isles, particularly London, working as whatever, a barman, a labourer, a waitress, a hairdresser or something, and then that was the way to see Europe. That was a jumping off point for it. They often have those ancestry visas, at least one grandparent born in the United Kingdom, or if they come to the Republic of Ireland, at least one grandparent born in Ireland, you get Irish citizenship straight off like that. So that's not happening anymore. I don't know if the visa system has changed. I don't think the ancestry visas disappeared, but I think often Eastern Europeans started to do those jobs. Australia got so prosperous that if they wanted to come to Europe, they could just go. They wouldn't need to work for a while in Europe to earn the capital to do that. And plus, they're more and more young Asian Australians, or those who've got no historical ties to the United Kingdom. And often those Australians of British descent is one generation too many, is their great-grandparents moved out, not their grandparents. So anyway, Albanese's administration, he wants to cut carbon emissions in Oz by 43% by 2030. That is a highly ambitious target. I mean, so far as I know, that's the highest target in the world. Only 8 years to achieve that. It's very difficult to see him doing that. Even if he falls short of it, if he does anything, that if he gets close, that'll be really impressive. And obviously there was some change in the Australian Senate as well. In the Senate, it's not so proportional. There's the same number of senates for every state, regardless of population, and then there are a few for the territories, as in the Northern Territory, the Australian Capital Territory, Canberra. So with Canberra and the Northern Territory have a much smaller population. Remember, New South Wales is by far the most populous state, with about 40% of the population. So I know with this image of jackaroos and so on, but Australia is very much an urbanised country. If you put about the 4 biggest cities together, that's about half the population. You know, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth together. Like in Western Australia, most of the population lives in Perth. So huge swathes of Australia are just empty. Anyway, so Morrison, he's resigning as leader of the Liberal Party, and who's going to be the new leader? Possibly Peter Dutton, the former Defence Minister. This is going to be a real challenge for the new Prime Minister, Albanese, to square the circle. How is he going to reduce carbon emissions that drastically, that rapidly, without damaging the economy too much, and without scaring away moderate voters who say, "Ooh, this is costing us too much, we're losing our jobs if we work in anything relating to hydrocarbons, and why should we make a big sacrifice when the Chinese aren't, when they're polluting like crazy? You know, our effect on climate change will be infinitesimally small." Australia's got another worry, is that this new defence pact that China signed with the Solomon Islands, which is not far to the north west of Australia. So Australia's feeling menaced and encircled and so on. So that's it. So things finally went wrong for Scott Morrison, who believed in miracles, but he wasn't able to pull a rabbit out of the hat himself. So it's fascinating to watch the Australian political scene, where Labour's been the major party for over a century. I mean, the Liberals and Nationals are strictly two separate parties. Labour's often been successful. They're probably the most successful Labour Party in the world, is the Australian Labour Party, but increasingly concerned by the environment, trying to make newer Australians, Asian Australians, feel welcome and so on, dealing with the demands of Aborigines, privileging them and so on. Thanks for watching my video. Bye.